what if the exact thing your doctor, your therapist, and basically every wellness blog out there has told you to relentlessly avoid is actually the only thing that can fundamentally slow down your aging process?
I mean, it sounds completely backwards, right?
It totally does, because we've spent decades treating stress as this absolute boogeyman of human health.
Yeah, exactly.
We're told to reduce it, meditate it away, medicate it, just run from it constantly. But today, we are completely inverting that narrative.
They really are.
We're taking a deep dive into a stack of source material today, heavily featuring the work and biological insights of Gary Brecka. And we're exploring this concept that just sounds so counterintuitive at first glance.
Right.
We're asking, what if your biology is actually starving for stress?
It is a profound shift, in how we view human physiology. Because the prevailing narrative right now treats the human body like this fragile piece of glass that just needs to be protected from the environment at all costs.
Like we just need to be bubble wrapped.
Exactly. Bubble wrapped and kept perfectly comfortable. But the clinical data, especially when we look at longevity and cellular resilience, it points to the exact opposite conclusion.
Really?
Yeah, the body isn't glass. It's anti-fragile. It actually requires specific, intense environmental friction to function optimally.
And that brings us to the core concept of today's deep dive. This idea of hormesis, or intentional good stress.
Right.
Okay, let's unpack this, because what exactly is the biological baseline we're starting from here?
Well, we have to start with homeostasis.
Right, because when we say stress is good, we need to be incredibly precise about what kind of stress we actually mean. We aren't talking about, working a 100-hour week while going through a brutal divorce.
Oh, absolutely not. No, the baseline we need to understand first is homeostasis. And homeostasis is basically your body's ultimate comfort zone.
Okay.
It's this biochemical state where your internal environment is just perfectly regulated.
So like everything is just balanced.
Exactly. Your core temperature is sitting right at 98.6 degrees. Your blood pH is stable. Your resting heart rate is nice and low. The system isn't working hard at all. It's just maintaining the status quo.
It's like the physiological equivalent of a thermostat set to 72 degrees in a perfectly insulated room.
That is a really good way to picture it, actually. And your body fiercely protects that balance. But, there is a hidden danger in that perfect balance.
What do you mean?
Well, when biological systems remain in uninterrupted homeostasis for extended periods, they begin to stagnate. They lose their adaptive edge.
Like they get lazy.
Exactly. The cellular machinery gets lazy. So hormesis, then, is the intentional temporary disruption of that homeostasis.
Oh, I see.
You introduce a mild, controlled stressor like, say, a sudden drop in temperature or a brief period of nutrient deprivation.
And the body just registers that as a massive disturbance.
Right.
So the thermostat suddenly drops to 40 degrees and the physiological furnace just kicks on.
It kicks on and, more importantly, it upgrades its own wiring.
Wait, really? It upgrades itself?
Yeah. The body works frantically to restore that 72-degree baseline, but the adaptation doesn't stop once the balance is restored.
Okay, so what happens?
The disturbance activates these ancient, deeply embedded cellular defense mechanisms. So the baseline actually moves up.
Oh, wow.
The system makes itself fundamentally more robust. That way, the next time it encounters that specific stress, it won't be pushed out of balance so easily.
That makes so much sense. I mean, it's just like lifting weights, right?
Yes, exactly like that.
You go to the gym, you lift something heavy, you literally tear your muscle fibers.
Right, you're causing acute damage.
And then the body rebuilds them stronger, so the same weight doesn't tear them next time. We're just talking about applying that exact same logic to your entire nervous and cellular system.
Precisely.
There is a quote from the source material that really shifted my perspective on this entire topic. The author states, aging is the aggressive pursuit of comfort.
I love that quote. That phrase just distills the entire modern human condition into a single biological problem.
It really does.
Because we have spent the last few centuries engineering an environment that systematically eliminates every natural trigger our bodies evolved to rely on for growth.
I mean, just think about the evolutionary mismatch here.
It's huge.
We are walking around with the exact same genomic hardware as our Paleolithic ancestors.
Huh?
And they definitely did not live in a state of constant homeostasis.
No, not at all. They endured freezing winters, scorching summers, periods of severe famine, and moments that demanded just explosive life-or-death physical exertion.
And those ancestral bodies didn't just passively endure those extremes.
No, they utilize those environmental hardships as vital biological signaling mechanisms.
So the stress was actually sending a signal to the cells.
Exactly. Like when you face a temporary famine, the body doesn't just wither away. It activates survival genes that repair cellular damage, ensuring the organism is sharp enough to hunt.
Because if you're hungry, you need to be at your absolute best to find food.
Right. And when exposed to freezing temperatures, the vascular system is forced into this massive workout just to preserve core heat.
But today, we aggressively pursue the exact opposite of that.
You really do.
I mean, we move from climate-controlled bedrooms to climate-controlled cars to climate-controlled offices.
And we have this hypercaloric food supply available through an app on our phones 24 hours a day.
Yeah, you just press a button and a cheeseburger shows up at your door.
Exactly. We have completely eradicated the environmental signals that tell our cells to stay resilient.
And because we lack those signals, our cellular repair mechanisms just never get the call to action.
They don't.
It's like having a world-class fire department in a city where nothing ever catches fire. Eventually, the trucks just rust, and the firefighters forget how to use the hoses.
That is a brilliant analogy. That degradation, that rusting of the machinery, is exactly what we experience as accelerated aging.
So when there is no perceived threat, the body just refuses to spend precious energy building resilience.
Right. It won't spend ATP, which is cellular energy, unless it absolutely has to. The biological systems simply begin a slow, uninterrupted decline.
I struggle with this part, though.
Okay, what part?
Well, my doctor, the media, basically every health study I read tells me that stress is the primary driver of chronic disease.
Sure.
They say it causes systemic inflammation, it raises blood pressure, it destroys our sleep architecture.
All of that is true.
So how does the biological machinery actually differentiate between the good, controlled stress of, like, jumping into an icy river and the bad, toxic stress of a terrible job, crushing debt, or chronic anxiety?
That is the big question.
Because cortisol is cortisol, isn't it? I mean, my adrenal glands don't know if I'm cold or if my boss is just yelling at me.
This raises an important question, and you're right, the initial chemical cascade is indeed virtually identical.
Okay, so it's the same chemicals.
Yes, your adrenal glands release epinephrine, norepinephrine, and cortisol regardless of the source. The crucial distinction lies in the receptor pathways.
And what dictates those pathways?
They are entirely dictated by two factors, duration and control.
Okay, let's break down the mechanics of duration and control, because that seems to be the linchpin of this whole concept.
It absolutely is. So let's look at chronic psychological stress first. The debt, the toxic job.
Right.
That type of stress is characterized by its relentless duration and your total lack of physical control over it. You wake up with it, it stews in your brain all day, and you go to sleep with it.
So cortisol is just continuously dripping into your bloodstream.
Exactly. And when cortisol receptors are chronically saturated like that, it leads to a breakdown of tissue, suppression of the immune system, and an inflammatory state in the brain.
Because the body never gets a break.
Right. The body never receives the biological signal that the threat has passed. It is trapped in this low-grade emergency mode, which is highly destructive.
So the fire alarm is basically just blaring for 10 years straight.
Yes. Now look at a hormetic stressor. Say you choose to step into a sauna or a cold plunge. You have absolute control.
Because you can just step out whenever you want.
Exactly. And the duration is incredibly short, maybe 3 minutes, maybe 15 minutes. You spike those exact same stress hormones, but the spike is massive, acute, and entirely transient.
And because it's transient, there's an endpoint.
That endpoint is everything. When you step out of the cold water, the acute stress terminates instantly. The body receives a massive, undeniable, all-clear signal.
The threat is gone.
Exactly. And it is precisely that rapid drop in stress hormones that acts as the trigger for the parasympathetic nervous system to take over.
So the recovery system kicks in.
Yes. The body then shifts into a deep recovery phase. It overcompensates for the acute stress by synthesizing new proteins and fortifying the cells.
And toxic stress just lacks that all-clear signal.
Exactly. Hormetic stress is entirely built around it.
Man, that reframing just changes the entire paradigm for me.
It's powerful, right?
It really is. Stress isn't just this invisible malicious force that happens to you. It's a physiological lever that you can actively pull.
And knowing how to pull that lever requires understanding what's actually happening under the hood.
Right. So let's zoom in a bit. Let's move from the macroscopic philosophy of comfort to the microscopic machinery inside our cells.
Okay.
Because the source material points heavily toward our cellular engines, the mitochondria.
Oh, the mitochondria are absolutely fascinating because they aren't just these static batteries.
Right. I remember learning about them in high school biology as the powerhouse of the cell.
Yeah, that's the classic definition. But they are highly dynamic organelles. They are constantly shifting, deveiling, and adapting based on the energy demands of the cell.
And the source notes that we have roughly 110 trillion of these powerhouses.
110 trillion.
That's just an unfathomable number. And they're all producing ATP, the fundamental energy currency of life.
Right. Every time your heart beats, every time a neuron fires, every time your lungs expand, you are burning ATP.
And the primary way we force an adaptation in this system, according to the source, is through intense physical exertion, specifically high-intensity interval training, or HIIT.
Yes, HIIT really distills the hormetic principle of exercise into its most potent form.
Because a slow, steady jog doesn't do the same thing, right?
No, a slow, steady jog is great for general cardiovascular tone, don't get me wrong, but it often operates near the body's comfortable baseline.
So you're not shocking the system.
Exactly. HIIT requires you to push the organism to its absolute metabolic threshold for very short bursts.
You are intentionally inducing a severe, localized energy crisis.
That's the exact mechanism. When you sprint at maximum capacity, the muscle cells are burning ATP significantly faster than the existing mitochondria can actually produce it.
So you run out of fuel.
Right. This rapid depletion of ATP, along with the buildup of metabolic byproducts like reactive oxygen species, acts as a severe chemical stress signal.
The cell essentially panics.
It panics. It realizes that its current energy infrastructure is completely insufficient to survive this level of output.
So the biological response isn't just to recover back to baseline, but to actually expand capacity.
Exactly. It activates a pathway involving a protein called PGC1-alpha.
PGC1-alpha.
Yeah, it's basically the master regulator of mitochondrial biogenesis.
Meaning the creation of new mitochondria.
Right. The cell literally begins constructing brand new mitochondria from scratch, while also expanding the size and efficiency of the existing ones.
The result is a denser, more powerful energy grid.
Yes.
And the efficiency of this adaptation is just wild. The source cites data showing that just 10 minutes of intense interval training can trigger cardiovascular and metabolic benefits that rival 50 minutes of moderate intensity exercise.
It's all about the signal. The intensity of the signal is far more important than the duration.
You are screaming at the cells to upgrade, rather than whispering at them for an hour.
That is exactly it. But that building process is only one half of the cellular equation.
What's the other half?
Well, building new infrastructure is great, but over time, cellular components get damaged. Proteins misfold. Old mitochondria become dysfunctional and start leaking free radicals.
Oh, right. Which brings us to what happens when we stop eating. Intermittent fasting and the mechanism of autophagy. I really want to dig into the mechanics of this because I feel like it's widely misunderstood.
It's incredibly misunderstood.
People hear fasting and they immediately think about calorie deficits and dropping a pant size.
Right. They think it's a diet.
But the source material frames fasting as a profound cellular workout.
The weight loss is almost a side effect compared to the longevity benefits of autophagy.
So what exactly is autophagy?
Autophagy translates from Greek as self-eating.
Which sounds a little alarming.
It does sound alarming, but it is actually the most sophisticated recycling program in the known universe.
You know, I used to think of autophagy like a microscopic maid service, just sweeping up trash. But based on the literature, it's much more structural than that. I was thinking about it more like a Lego castle.
Lego castle. Okay, explain the Lego concept.
So when you were constantly eating, when you were in that aggressive pursuit of dietary comfort, your body is constantly receiving new nutrients. It's like dump trucks constantly dropping off fresh, brand new Lego bricks at a construction site.
Okay, I follow.
The cellular workers are so busy grabbing the new bricks and building new structures that they completely ignore the mess on the floor.
Oh, that's good.
Over time, the cellular floor gets littered with broken, discolored, misshapen Lego bricks. In biological terms, these are misfolded proteins and senescent zombie cells that refuse to die but no longer function properly.
Right, they just sit there causing systemic inflammation.
Exactly.
And that inflammation is a primary driver of neurodegeneration, metabolic syndrome, and just general biological aging.
It's basically the root of all the bad stuff.
It really is. The continuous nutrient sensing pathway, specifically a protein complex called mTOR, acts as a green light for constant growth.
MTOR, okay.
Yeah. As long as mTOR is active, meaning as long as amino acids and glucose are present in the blood, autophagy is completely inhibited.
Because the dump trucks are still arriving.
Right. But when you introduce the hormetic stress of a fast, when you halt the dump trucks and stop delivering new Lego bricks, the environment changes entirely.
The cell senses a lack of incoming raw materials.
Yes. The mTOR pathway shuts down, and a different pathway, AMPK, ramps up.
And the cellular workers realize they still need materials to maintain the castle walls, but no new deliveries are coming in.
So they have to look inward.
Exactly. They look down at the floor, they see the broken, misshapen Lego bricks, the damaged proteins, and they start scooping them up.
Mechanically, the cell forms a double membrane structure called an autophagosome.
An autophagosome.
Yeah, which basically acts like a biological garbage bag. It engulfs these damaged proteins and dysfunctional mitochondria, and then it merges with a lysosome.
And what does the lysosome do?
The lysosome is filled with highly acidic enzymes that strip those broken parts down to their base molecular components, their original amino acids.
So it melts the Lego bricks back into raw plastic.
Exactly. The cell then takes those recycled materials and builds brand new, perfectly functioning structures.
It is just the ultimate internal renovation. And it only happens when we intentionally induce the stress of starvation.
Right. We force the body to clean its own house.
So we've seen how internal stressors, like the energy crisis of HIT and the nutrient deprivation of fasting, build infrastructure and clear out debris.
Right.
But our ancestors were also entirely at the mercy of the elements. What happens when we subject our biology to external extremes?
That's where things get really dramatic.
Let's look at the systemic shock of the fire and ice protocols.
Okay. Using extreme temperature as a lever for human health is incredibly well documented.
Right.
When we look at cold exposure, whether that's a plunge in a frozen lake or, a specialized cryotherapy chamber, we are utilizing one of the most jarring hormetic stressors available to humans.
And the source data here is just robust. It notes that cold exposure triggers massive releases of norepinephrine and endorphins.
Massive releases.
It drastically drops baseline cortisol over time and astonishingly leads to a 29% reduction in sickness absence.
That's a massive number.
I really want to understand the how behind that 29% figure. Because how does freezing your skin translate to not getting the flu?
To understand the immune mobilization, we have to look at the immediate physiological panic of cold shock.
The panic.
Yeah. The second you submerge in, say, 40-degree water, your skin's thermoreceptors send a frantic life-or-death signal to the hypothalamus.
So the body literally assumes you're about to die from hypothermia.
It does. It is the ultimate disturbance of homeostasis.
Precisely the opposite of comfort.
Right. And in response, the sympathetic nervous system triggers profound vasoconstriction.
Vasoconstriction, meaning the blood vessels shrink.
Yes. The blood vessels in your arms and legs clamp down violently to force all the warm blood into your core.
To protect your vital organs.
Exactly. But it isn't just blood that gets moved around. This massive vascular constriction, combined with the spike in adrenaline and norepinephrine, mechanically flushes the lymphatic system.
The lymphatic system. That's the network that carries white blood cells and clears cellular waste, right? But unlike the circulatory system, it doesn't have a heart to pump it. It relies entirely on muscle contraction and vascular pressure.
Correct. So the cold shock basically forces the lymphatic fluid to circulate rapidly. Furthermore, the acute stress causes a massive mobilization of leukocytes' white blood cells into the bloodstream.
Because the body believes it is facing a traumatic survival event.
Yes. So it releases immune cells to prepare for a potential injury or infection. When you practice this regularly, you are constantly training your immune system to mobilize quickly and efficiently.
It's like running fire drills for your immune cells.
That's a great way to put it. Additionally, cold exposure activates cold shock proteins like RBM3, which have been shown in animal models to protect against neurodegeneration and actually repair synapses in the brain.
That is unbelievable. And then there's the metabolic aspect too, because we hear a lot about brown fat in relation to cold plunges.
Brown adipose tissue, or BAT, yes. Unlike white fat, which just passively stores excess calories, brown fat is highly metabolically active. It is packed with mitochondria, which is actually what gives it its brown color.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. When you are exposed to extreme cold, your body needs to generate heat without shivering, a process called non-shivering thermogenesis.
How does it do that without moving muscles?
Yeah.
Because I always thought shivering was the only way we generated heat.
It utilizes a protein found in brown fat called UCP1, or uncoupling protein 1. This protein literally uncouples the mitochondrial electron transport chain.
What does that mean practically?
It means instead of the mitochondria using fuel to create ATP for cellular energy, UCP1 causes them to burn glucose and lipids purely to generate heat.
Wow.
And regular cold exposure actually increases your volume of brown fat, meaning your body becomes incredibly efficient at burning stored fat just to maintain core temperature.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. We're looking at the opposite extreme as well, the profound heat of a sauna.
Right.
If cold shock constricts the system to protect the core, heat exposure seems to do the exact opposite, but with equally fascinating cardiovascular benefits.
Heat is a profound cardiovascular mimic. The source material outlines that regular sauna use enhances blood flow, drastically reduces systemic inflammation, and lowers the risk of cardiovascular disease.
Because when you sit in a 160-degree sauna, your body faces a completely different survival threat, overheating.
Right?
So instead of pulling blood inward, it pushes it outward.
Yes. Your heart rate elevates significantly, often mimicking a moderate run, actually, to pump massive volumes of blood to the surface of your skin, allowing you to sweat and dissipate the heat.
And that triggers some sort of chemical release.
Yes, it triggers the release of endothelial nitric oxide synthase, which produces nitric oxide.
Nitric oxide.
Exactly. Nitric oxide relaxes and widens the blood vessels, dramatically improving endothelial function and lowering blood pressure.
But the magic of the sauna isn't just in the plumbing, it's in the proteins, right? The heat shock proteins.
Heat shock proteins, or HSPs, are perhaps the most vital component of thermal hormesis. When your core temperature rises, the structural integrity of your cellular proteins is actually threatened.
Meaning they begin to unravel.
Yes, they misfold, much like the damaged Lego bricks we discussed earlier. In response to this thermal stress, your cells flood the system with heat shock proteins, specifically HSP70 and HSP90.
And what do these proteins actually do?
They act as molecular chaperones.
Chaperones.
Yeah, they seek out proteins that have become misfolded or damaged by the heat, and they physically refold them back into their correct, functional, three-dimensional shapes.
That is incredible.
And just like with the cold adaptations, when you leave the sauna and the acute stress ends, these heat shock proteins actually linger in your system.
They don't just disappear.
No, they patrol the cells, repairing damage that had nothing to do with the heat damage from oxidative stress, aging, or metabolic dysfunction.
Now, the source provides very strict parameters for this. It recommends starting between 120 and 140 degrees Fahrenheit and explicitly states to max out at 180 degrees. If you are operating between 160 and 180 degrees, it advises limiting the session to 15 minutes. And regarding the cold plunge, it advises starting with just 30 seconds at the end of a warm shower.
Very important.
It explicitly states there is little evidence that going colder or staying in longer provides additional benefit. I really want to highlight this because modern biohacking culture has turned these tools into, extreme endurance sports.
Oh, absolutely.
People are sitting in ice water for 20 minutes trying to prove their toughness.
That behavior fundamentally misunderstands the mechanism of hormesis.
How so?
If you stay in a freezing plunge until you are verging on hypothermia, or sit in a 200-degree sauna until you are severely dehydrated, you have exited the hormetic window entirely.
You've gone too far.
Way too far. You are no longer sending a mild adaptive signal, you are causing acute systemic damage.
You are taking that 72-degree thermostat and just ripping it off the wall.
The body won't spend energy building resilience after that. It will spend every ounce of available energy just trying to repair the massive insult you just delivered to it.
So what's the goal then?
The goal is the minimum effective dose. 30 seconds of cold water is entirely sufficient to trigger the norepinephrine spike, flush the lymphatic system, and activate brown fat.
And for the sauna?
15 minutes in a sauna is all it takes to release the heat shock proteins. More is not better. More is just unnecessary tissue damage.
That concept of the minimum effective dose makes these tools incredibly accessible. You don't need to be an extreme athlete. You just need 30 seconds of courage at the end of a shower.
Exactly.
And it is vital that we make these protocols accessible because the biological baseline of the general population is currently failing on a massive scale.
Sadly.
The source points out a deeply alarming statistic. Almost 50% of the nation currently has metabolic syndrome.
1 out of every 2 adults. Let that sink in.
It's staggering. And metabolic syndrome isn't a single disease, is it?
No, it's a cluster of deeply interconnected dysfunctions. It presents as increased blood pressure, highly elevated blood sugar, excess visceral fat around the waistline, and abnormal lipid profiles, specifically high triglycerides and low HDL cholesterol.
If we look at this through the lens of our anchor quote, aging, is the aggressive pursuit of comfort metabolic syndrome is the ultimate biological consequence of that comfort.
It really is.
We have engineered an environment completely devoid of physical stressors, and we have flooded it with continuously available, highly processed energy.
The modern metabolic crisis is essentially a disease of energy toxicity. Our bodies are overflowing with fuel, but our cells have completely lost the ability to actually process it.
And the primary culprit in this breakdown is insulin resistance. We touched on insulin earlier, but we need to dive into the mechanism here because the source notes that fasting is one of the most powerful tools to reverse it.
It is.
How does the cell actually become resistant to insulin?
Think of insulin as the master hormone of energy storage. Whenever you eat, especially carbohydrates, your blood glucose levels rise.
Right, your blood sugar goes up.
Exactly. The pancreas detects this and secretes insulin into the bloodstream. Insulin travels to the cells, muscle cells, fat cells, liver cells, and binds to specific receptors on the cell surface.
Okay, so it connects to the cell.
Right. And this binding action acts like a key turning a lock, opening a channel that allows the glucose to leave the blood and enter the cell to be used for ATP production.
But the problem arises from the frequency of our eating. We eat a carbohydrate-heavy breakfast, a snack at 10 a.m., lunch, another snack, dinner, and then we graze until midnight.
Exactly. We never stop eating. So the pancreas is forced to constantly pump out insulin. The blood is just saturated with it all day long.
But what happens to the cells?
Over time, the cells become overwhelmed by this relentless signal. To protect themselves from taking in toxic levels of energy, the cells begin to downregulate their insulin receptors.
Downregulate?
Yeah, the receptors literally change shape or retreat from the surface of the cell membrane. The locks become rusted.
So the key no longer fits.
Exactly. So the pancreas pumps out even more insulin to try and force the doors open, creating a vicious cycle of hyperinsulinemia.
Wow. And then what happens to the sugar?
The sugar remains trapped in the bloodstream, where it acts almost like shards of glass, damaging the delicate endothelial lining of the blood vessels, which leads to cardiovascular disease.
And I imagine the cells themselves aren't doing too well either.
No, meanwhile, the cells themselves are essentially starving for energy because they cannot absorb the glucose. The entire system is completely broken.
Which is where the hormetic stress of fasting becomes a profound therapeutic tool.
Yes.
The source recommends starting with a 12-hour fast from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. How does simply not eating for 12 hours fix those rusted cellular locks?
It's all about hormonal silence. When you stop eating at 8 p.m., the incoming supply of glucose halts. Over the next several hours, your body processes the remaining energy.
Okay.
By around hour 10 to 12, your blood insulin levels drop to their absolute baseline.
So the constant screaming signal finally goes quiet.
Exactly. In the absence of that constant insulin bombardment, the cells actually begin to heal.
Really? Just from the silence?
Yes. The cellular machinery senses that the insulin levels are low, and it responds by migrating fresh, highly sensitive insulin receptors back to the surface of the cell membrane. The locks are replaced.
So the next morning, when you break your fast at 8 a.m., the system works with elegant efficiency.
Right. A small amount of insulin is released, the newly sensitized receptors catch the signal immediately, the channels open, and the blood glucose is cleared instantly.
And you achieve that profound metabolic reset simply by skipping a late-night snack and sleeping. You are literally leveraging the body's natural circadian rhythms to induce a mild hormetic stress.
It's incredibly elegant when you think about it.
It really is. Now, we focused heavily on the physiological body, mitochondrial biogenesis, autophagic recycling, metabolic markers, immune mobilization. But the source material makes a fascinating pivot here.
Oh, yes.
It reveals that the most immediate visceral impact of hormesis often occurs in the brain.
The neurology of hormesis is arguably the most rapidly expanding area of this research right now.
Right, because the physical stress becomes a mechanism for extreme mental endurance and emotional regulation.
Yes. The source notes that these acute physical stressors fundamentally balance neurotransmitter ratios, specifically dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine.
Which directly alleviates symptoms of clinical anxiety and depression.
Exactly.
To illustrate this, the source targets one of the most universal and agonizing experiences of the modern human condition: the ruminating mind at night.
Oh, we've all been there.
Right.
Yeah.
You're exhausted. Your
Yeah.
body aches for sleep. You get into bed, you turn off the lights, and suddenly your brain boots up like a supercomputer.
It's the worst.
You start replaying a slightly awkward conversation from 3 years ago. You stress about a project due next week. You worry about a strange noise your car is making. The body is immobile, but the mind is running a marathon.
The biological driver of that nocturnal rumination is a specific class of neurotransmitters called catecholamines.
Catecholamines. Tell me about catecholamines.
So, catecholamines include epinephrine, norepinephrine, and dopamine. They are essentially the chemical messengers of the sympathetic nervous system.
Okay.
When you are lying in bed and you think about that stressful project, your brain perceives a threat. It activates a region in the brainstem called the locus coeruleus, which literally dumps norepinephrine into the cortex.
So an abstract thought creates a tangible chemical release.
Yes. And it creates a vicious feedback loop. The norepinephrine spikes your heart rate and increases your vigilance.
And then what?
Your brain senses this physiological arousal and thinks, my heart is racing, there must be something dangerous happening right now, I need to figure out what it is.
So it searches for more things to worry about.
Exactly, which triggers more catecholamine release. You are caught in a self-sustaining neurochemical storm.
The protocol the source introduces to break this storm is just a brilliant piece of biological hacking. It relies on a profound irony. To calm the mind for sleep, you must briefly shock the body.
Oh, right.
It outlines a contrast therapy routine specifically called the shower protocol.
The protocol is remarkably simple, but neurochemically devastating to that anxiety loop.
How does it work?
You take your normal warm evening shower. At the very end, you turn the water to its maximum safe heat and let it run directly down your spine for about 60 seconds. Then you step completely out of the stream, turn the dial to the coldest possible setting, and step back in. And as the author puts it, you just deal with it for 30 to 60 seconds.
So what does this all mean for the brain? Why does freezing your skin stop the abstract thoughts about your car transmission?
It works through a mechanism called sensory override.
Sensory override. Okay, explain that.
When you are worrying in bed, your brain is operating in the default mode network, which handles abstract thought, time travel, and self-reflection. But the brain has limited bandwidth.
Right.
When you suddenly step into a stream of freezing water, the somatic sensory input from your skin is so massive, so violently overwhelming, that it completely hijacks the brain's processing power.
So the brain looks at the abstract worry about next week's meeting and says, we literally do not have the bandwidth for this right now. We are freezing to death in the present moment.
Exactly. The physiological reality of the cold shock shatters the psychological loop. The default mode network shuts down, and the acute survival networks light up.
Wow.
You experience a massive final spike of those catecholamines. But here's the critical pivot. When you turn off the cold water and step onto the bath mat, the threat vanishes instantly.
The ultimate all-clear signal again.
Yes, the locus coeruleus stops firing, the catecholamines plummet. Because the contrast between the extreme cold and the warm air of the bathroom is so sharp, the body initiates an incredibly powerful parasympathetic rebound.
And the vagus nerve activates, right?
Exactly, flooding the system with acetylcholine, which physically slows the heart rate. The racing thoughts are, as the source notes, blown completely out of your mind.
You are left with a pristine, almost primal neurochemical quiet.
It's a total reset.
This is such a vital tool for you, the listener, today. You don't need a prescription. You don't need a high-tech biohacking facility. If you are in a sterile hotel room in a strange city, stressing about a presentation that will define your career, you have the ability to manually override your own nervous system.
It's entirely within your control.
You trade 1 minute of intense physical discomfort for 8 hours of deep restorative sleep.
It perfectly encapsulates the entire philosophy. Temporary, controlled friction yields lasting biological tranquility.
Which brings us to the final, absolute most critical phase of this entire scientific framework. We've subjected the body to intense protocols.
We have.
We've starved the cells to induce autophagy. We've exhausted the mitochondria with HII'd. We've subjected the vascular system to the extremes of the sauna and the cold plunge. And we've shocked the nervous system to break anxiety loops.
We pulled all the levers.
You've pulled the levers of stress. But none of the benefits we've discussed, literally zero, occur during the application of the stress. Let's explore the final piece of the puzzle, the art of recovery.
This is so important. If there is a fatal flaw in how modern culture approaches health, it is the glorification of the grind.
Oh, big time. No days off.
Exactly. People believe that the workout itself builds the muscle or that the cold plunge itself fortifies the immune system. That is biologically false.
Because the stressor is nothing more than a signal.
Right. It is an architectural blueprint. The actual construction, the synthesis of new proteins, the generation of mitochondria, the upregulation of receptors happens exclusively during deep recovery.
You break the muscle in the gym, you build the muscle in bed.
Yes. And if you deny the body that recovery phase, you turn hormesis back into toxic chronic stress.
Right. If you stack a heavy workout, a sauna session, a cold plunge, and a prolonged fast all into the same day, every single day, you're endlessly signaling the body to adapt,
Right.
but never giving it the resources or the time to actually do so.
The systemic damage simply accumulates.
The source material is adamant about this balance. It highlights an array of active recovery practices that foster this parasympathetic state. Gentle yoga, sunlight exposure, mindfulness, stretching, and PEMF.
PEMF is fascinating.
Now, PEMF, pulsed electromagnetic field therapy, is a term that gets thrown around a lot in longevity circles, but it sounds like pure science fiction. What is the actual mechanism there?
It does sound esoteric, but the mechanism is grounded in cellular voltage.
Voltage, like electricity.
Yes, every cell in your body operates on an electrochemical gradient. The cell membrane has a specific voltage potential driven by ion channels that pump sodium, potassium, and calcium in and out.
Okay.
When cells are damaged or deeply stressed, this membrane voltage often drops, impairing the cell's ability to efficiently produce ATP or absorb nutrients.
So the battery's literally running low.
Exactly. PEMF devices emit very specific low-frequency electromagnetic waves that pass completely through the body.
And what do those waves do?
These magnetic pulses interact directly with the ions in the cellular membrane, essentially inducing a microelectrical current that helps restore the optimal voltage potential.
Wow.
By mechanically stimulating these ion channels, PEMF assists the cell in clearing out metabolic waste and accelerating the repair of tissue damage during the hormetic stress phases.
So it's actively facilitating the biological rebound.
Yes, it's essentially charging the cellular battery.
Fascinating. But the source material also highlights one specific equipment-free recovery protocol that focuses on sleep, and the results it describes are just staggering.
Oh, the breathing protocol.
Yes. The author claims that using this specific breathwork technique allows him to fall asleep in under 5 minutes. He notes it astounds his wife because he occasionally falls asleep in the middle of a sentence.
It's incredibly effective.
The protocol is highly specific.
Yeah.
Right as you get into bed, you take a 5 to 7 second inhale through the nose, pause briefly, and then perform a very long, slow exhale through a straw, or pursed lips, as if using a straw. You complete 10 rounds of this. Why does altering the ratio of the inhale to the exhale knock the brain out so quickly?
It is a mechanical manipulation of the autonomic nervous system via the vagus nerve and the baroflux.
Let's break that down.
Let's analyze the physical mechanics of breathing. When you inhale, your diaphragm contracts and moves downward.
Okay.
This physical movement actually creates slightly more space in the thoracic cavity. As a result, your heart expands just a fraction of a millimeter.
And when the heart expands, the blood moves through it slightly slower.
Exactly. A node in your heart detects this microscopic slowing of blood flow and sends a signal to the brainstem saying, blood flow is slowing down, speed the heart up to compensate.
So on every single inhale you take, your heart rate naturally increases slightly and sympathetic nervous system tone goes up.
Right. Inhalation is biologically linked to alertness.
So what happens on the exhale?
The exact reverse. The diaphragm relaxes and moves up, compressing the thoracic space.
And that squeezes the heart.
The heart gets slightly squeezed, blood moves through it faster. The brain detects the acceleration, and it sends a signal via the vagus nerve to release acetylcholine and slow the heart rate down.
So exhalation is directly mechanically tied to the parasympathetic nervous system, the deep rest and digest state.
You've got it.
So by using the breathing through a straw technique,
Yeah.
you are intentionally restricting the out-breath. You are forcing the exhalation to be 2 or 3 times longer than the inhalation.
You are manually overriding the system. The 5 to 7 second nasal inhale serves a purpose too.
What does the inhale do?
Well, the nasal cavity produces nitric oxide, a vasodilator that travels into the lungs and expands the blood vessels, optimizing oxygen uptake.
And the pause.
The brief pause allows for maximum gas exchange in the alveoli. But the true magic is in that long, restricted exhale.
By dragging out the exhalation, you are holding your foot firmly on the biological brake pedal.
You are sending a continuous, rhythmic, undeniable signal to the brainstem that you are entirely safe.
The locus coeruleus goes completely dormant.
10 rounds of that protocol shifts the autonomic balance so aggressively toward the parasympathetic side that the biological drive for sleep becomes overwhelming.
It is the perfect, elegant conclusion to a day of intentional stress.
It really is a beautifully complete system when you put it all together.
When you synthesize all of this,
Yeah.
you realize that hormesis isn't about punishment. It isn't this militaristic, masochistic approach to daily life where you must constantly suffer to be healthy.
No, not at all.
It is a highly strategic dance between intense challenge and profound rest.
Exactly.
You introduce a mild friction, the energy depletion of HIT, the nutrient void of a fast, the thermal shock of a sauna. You force the cellular machinery to expand its capacity, and then you retreat into deep recovery to let the architecture rebuild.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the most powerful takeaway for the listener today is biological agency.
Biological agency, I like that.
Because we live in an era characterized by chronic, low-grade, inescapable stress, we feel completely at the mercy of our environments, our jobs, and our fading health.
It feels like it's all just happening to us.
Right. But understanding hormesis reveals that you actually hold the levers to your own cellular resilience.
By intentionally volunteering for microdoses of physical discomfort, you build an invincible physiological armor against the macro stresses of the modern world.
You train your nervous system to remain absolutely tranquil in the center of the storm.
You take the X-ray machine back from the doctor, you stop trying to surgically remove every trace of stress from your life, and you start wielding it as a precision tool to forge a stronger, sharper, more resilient version of yourself.
That's exactly right.
But before we sign off, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought. Something to chew on long after this deep dive ends. We have spent an hour establishing the undeniable biological reality that human cells literally require struggle, friction, and temporary hardship to clear out disease, build energy, and survive.
It is not optional. It is a fundamental cellular requirement.
So, if that is unequivocally true on a microscopic level, what does our modern world's obsession with endless convenience mean for the future of our species?
That is the big question.
If we continue to engineer every ounce of physical struggle out of our environment, if we never have to be cold, never have to be hungry, never have to exert ourselves to survive, what kind of fragile, degraded creatures are we ultimately destined to become?
That is a chilling question, and it strikes right at the core of human evolution.
Something to think about the next time you blindly reach for the thermostat or open that food delivery app late at night. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the narratives, keep exploring the science, and perhaps take a significantly colder shower tomorrow morning.